For more on this new Republican brand of economic populism, we want to welcome Pat Toomey. He is former GOP senator from Pennsylvania. And Senator Toomey, what do you think of this debate that's taking place within the party and more broadly?
Well, Becky, thanks for having me. First of all, I think it's important to note there's nothing new about these policy prescriptions. The idea of having the government take more control of the economy, allocate capital, pick winners and losers, even set some wages and prices and tell Americans from whom they can buy things and to whom they must sell things. These ideas have been standard policy for Democrats for a long time. There's nothing new about them. What's new is that there are Republicans who are now advocating it. I think, as you can probably guess, I think this attack on economic freedom and the free enterprise system is very ill-conceived. It starts with a hubris of thinking that as long as our guys are in control, they'll make the right decisions about how to direct economic growth and direct prosperity to where it should go, as though someone can know that. I think it's also a misreading of the politics. I think Donald Trump's appeal is much more cultural in nature. And if you look at the success that he had in economic policy in his first term, it was overwhelmingly with traditional Republican orthodoxy on taxes, on regulation, not on trade. He was a protectionist on trade, and he did some damage there, but it was pretty limited in its application. So I think this, first of all, this is a minority view among Republicans, both across the country and in Congress, and I certainly hope it stays that way.
You know, that's an interesting point. When it comes to trade, Donald Trump certainly was a protectionist on these issues. That other laundry list of things you don't think he would go along with as president, if you're looking at anything from banning stock buybacks to raising taxes on issues?
So that's an interesting question, because I don't think that Donald Trump has a well-defined ideology regarding economic policy generally. The one consistent idea that he's had for a very long time is he's very hostile to free trade. And by the way, I do think they will take very dramatic steps if Donald Trump is reelected. You know, Bob Lighthizer has laid out in his book exactly what he thinks President Trump should do, and President Trump seems to be adopting it. That's 10% universal tariffs on all imports as the first step, and then successive increases of 10% until our trade deficit disappears, which will happen as we have a very severe recession. But that's the trade side. That's predictable. I think the rest is much less predictable, but there will be a backlash from Republican voters who believe in economic freedom and the prosperity that has always accompanied it if they start going down this road.
Amen.
Senator Toomey, it's Eamon Javers here. We talked on the phone the other day about this, and I appreciate your thoughts. Some of these economic populists talk about this idea of free market fundamentalism, which they accuse, I would say, you and others in the Republican Party of sort of embracing the value of free markets over everything else, despite the damage that can be done to communities and families. What do you say to those voters in the Trump coalition who were on the losing end of globalization and on the losing end of free markets? Their communities were harmed by this. Their livelihoods were harmed by this. It might have benefited the country net, to your argument, but for some people, there was a real loss here. How do you approach those people and bring them back into your economic approach?
It's a fair point. First of all, the vast majority of Americans gained enormously from having a free economy, and our relative performance to our peers and near peers continues to underscore that greater freedom leads to greater prosperity. But you're right. If you have a free society, there will be disruptions, and some of those disruptions will be painful. It's really very similar to new technologies. When word processor software became readily available, I'm pretty sure it devastated the typewriter industry. And if you were in the business of making typewriters, if you worked at a plant that made typewriters, you certainly lost your job. I'm pretty sure we don't make typewriters anymore at all. The answer is not to prevent the word processor. The answer is not to prevent the enhancement in productivity and the gains for society as a whole. We should have a discussion. What do you do about dislocation? I think the most important thing, not necessarily the only thing, but the most important thing is really strong economic growth that's driving up wages, real wages, which is exactly what was happening before COVID struck, by the way. That's the most important thing you can do for people who are displaced by whether it's technology or trade or any other dynamic.